are you today? Today we're going to talk about rules. Rules, are they good or bad? I guess it depends on which rule you're talking about, right? It also depends on how many rules you're talking about. Too many rules and we'll never remember them all, let alone be able to follow them. Too few rules, however, and the whole world is chaos, everyone for themselves. John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, thought that we could live a life devoted to Jesus with 3 general rules that we live out in our lives. And all of the rules can fall under those general rules. What he laid out as his general rules for the United Societies of Methodists. And these were his rules. Do no harm. Do good. And attend upon all the ordinances of God. We're going to go through those 3 rules of John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, and see what he had to say about how we could use these 3 rules to guide and govern our lives as followers of Jesus. So the first rule, do no harm. That's a rule in medicine, isn't it? Do no harm. Well, John Wesley thought of it as something a little bit different. First, he said, avoid evil of any kind when you want to do no harm. And then he says, do no harm to God, for instance. Don't harm God by ignoring the commands that God sets out. For instance, the command to honor the Sabbath. Or, don't worship other gods. That would do harm to God. Don't take the Lord's name in vain. That does harm to God. It offends God. But more than just doing harm to God, he encourages us to not do harm to ourselves. So do no harm to God, do no harm to yourself. So, don't do things that are destructive to your body, like drunkenness, or some kind of needless self-indulgence, or self-harm, maybe even physical bodily harm, to get a high or feel good. Needless self-indulgence, don't get yourself wrapped up in things of this world too much. Do no harm to yourself and to your soul. And in addition to doing no harm to God and doing no harm to yourself, he says, do no harm to others. Now, John Wesley lived in the 18th century, and he was very much against slavery, which was still commonly practiced in the United States. And he could not believe that Christians in the United States supported slavery. Some did. And so he said, slaveholding is doing harm to another person. But in addition to that, an illegal or unethical business practice is doing harm to someone. Fighting and quarreling with other people is a way that you do harm to others. Even speaking badly or gossiping about other people is a way that we may do harm to another. So do no harm. Whatever you do, avoid doing something or anything that causes harm to God or others or yourself. But you know, John Wesley says it's not enough to just do no harm, it's also important for us to do good in the world. It's important for us to feed the hungry and clothe the naked and visit the sick and imprisoned. These are very important things. Caring for the most vulnerable in our society is a core Christian practice. In addition to that, we are to practice honest and ethical behavior with other people. Perhaps follow the golden rule as we know it. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And, John Wesley said, part of doing good as a Christian is teaching other people the gospel, the good news about Jesus Christ and the salvation that he offers for all people. Do no harm, John Wesley says, but also do good. Now there was a third rule, and his third rule was to attend upon all the ordinances of God. That's kind of an 18th century English way of saying, do the things that help you stay in love with God, that cultivate that relationship between you and God. So that might include worship, regular worship, and you know, it doesn't have to be in a church building. Worship can take place anywhere, even in your home. He encourages us to participate in the sacraments of baptism and communion. So be baptized and allow yourself to be welcomed into the family of God. Receive the sacrament of communion as regularly and as often as you can to remember that God has broken his body through Christ and poured out Christ's blood for our salvation and brought us into union with God by doing so. Attend upon all the ordinances of God includes family prayer and private prayer in our homes. It includes reading Scripture and studying Scripture. I have a whole series of Bible reading tips if you want to check those out. Especially in seasons like the Christian season of Lent, leading up towards Easter, John Wesley encourages us to practice things like fasting or abstinence, abstaining from or giving up a certain practice or a certain habit for a period of time, not just for the purpose of kicking a bad habit, but so that we can draw closer to God and replace those habits with increased time with God. And another ordinance of God that you might think about is generosity towards God. How are we giving from the abundant gifts that we have, the abundant resources that we have? How are we giving generously to God? Now that's just a real quick rundown of the general rules of Methodists that was established by John Wesley. But if you want to learn more about these 3 simple rules, you can read a book called that, 3 Simple Rules by Reuben Job. It's a wonderful book, and it's a very quick read. You can read it in one sitting if you want to learn more about the 3 simple rules, or the general rules of the United Societies of Methodists under John Wesley. That's all for today, and remember those 3 rules, and they are good rules. Remember as well that you are God's